My name is Grace, and I'm 20 years old. People think silence in a house means peace, but they're wrong. There's a kind of silence that isn't calm at all. It's hollow. It echoes in the walls and in your chest until you feel like you could scream and nobody would turn their head. That's the silence I grew up in. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Let me know your story down in the comments. I was the placeholder daughter, the middle child. In my family, that was just another word for invisible. My older sister Alexandra was the golden one. She was the varsity cheerleader, the debate team captain, the one who breathed oxygen and got a trophy for it. My younger sister Olivia was the baby. She could spill juice on the white carpet, and my parents would just laugh about her big personality. And then there was me, Grace. The quiet one. The one who got straight A's, did her chores without being asked, and never ever made a sound. My parents, Joseph and Nicole, were the audience and the directors of this little play. They only had spotlights for their 2 stars. I remember in high school I won a statewide essay competition. I brought home a small plaque and a check for $100. I put it on the kitchen counter. My father, Joseph, glanced at it on his way to the fridge. He just said, "That's nice. Did you take out the recycling?" An hour later, Olivia brought home a lopsided clay pot she'd made in art class. My mother, Nicole, acted like she'd just been handed the Mona Lisa. It went straight onto the mantelpiece. My plaque? I think it ended up in a drawer. I didn't have a name for it back then. I just thought there was something wrong with me, some essential piece I was missing that made me unworthy of being seen. It was only years later, sitting in a university psychology class, that I found the words for it: golden child and black sheep dynamics. The professor explained that in some families, children are cast in roles. One child becomes the golden child, the one who carries all the family's hopes and can do no wrong. Another becomes the black sheep, or in my case, the invisible one, who serves as a placeholder, the one who is just there. It's not about love, it's about function. Alexandra was their success. Olivia was their joy. I was just the extra. That slow, steady drip of indifference was one thing. But the day the drip turned into a flood was my 18th birthday. 18. It's a milestone. You're legally an adult. You can vote. You'd think at least that someone would notice. I woke up that morning with that stupid, familiar knot of hope in my stomach. Maybe this year. I went downstairs. My mother was on the phone planning a shopping trip with Alexandra. My father was at the table reading the news. Neither of them looked up. I made myself toast and went to my job at the university mailroom. I waited all day. I kept my phone on the table face up. Nothing. Not a text from Alexandra. Not a call from Olivia. Not a single word from my parents. I came home. The house was quiet. Then around 6, the front door burst open. My parents and Olivia came in laughing, carrying shopping bags. "You'll never guess," my mother said, her eyes shining as she looked right past me. "Olivia's coach thinks she has real potential for the varsity team next year." We took her out for ice cream to celebrate. They had a small cake from the grocery store. It said, "Congrats, Livy." They had gone out. They had bought a cake. They had celebrated. And not one of them, not for a single second, remembered that it was my 18th birthday. They didn't just forget me. They actively, happily celebrated someone else right in my place. I went up to my room. I didn't cry. I think a part of me, the part that had been holding its breath for 10 years, finally let it go. There was no maybe this year left. There was only the truth. I was a placeholder in a house that had run out of space for me. The anger didn't come. The sadness didn't come. What came was a cold, sharp, and perfectly logical clarity. You don't stay in a place you don't exist. So I made a decision. I pulled my old duffel bag from the back of the closet. I didn't pack everything. I didn't pack the high school yearbooks they never bought, or the clothes they'd never complimented, or the faded teddy bear I'd had since I was a baby. I packed my mailroom uniform. I packed the textbooks I'd paid for. I packed my toothbrush, and I packed the $740 I had saved in an envelope under my mattress. It was my entire life in one bag. I didn't write a note. A note would imply I was going somewhere and that they might want to know where. A note would imply I was running from something. But I wasn't. I was just leaving. I walked down the stairs. The sound of their laughter, my parents, Alexandra and Olivia, drifted from the living room. They were watching a movie, still celebrating Olivia's potential. I put my hand on the doorknob. For a second, just one, I waited. I thought someone will come out. Someone will ask where I'm going with a bag. No one came. I turned the knob, stepped out onto the porch, and quietly pulled the door shut behind me. I walked to the bus stop at the end of the street, and I didn't look back. The first night I stayed at a cheap motel by the highway. I sat on the lumpy bed and checked my phone. Nothing. It's late, I told myself. They're asleep. The next day I checked it again. Nothing. I took a bus to Madison, Wisconsin. It was a place I'd seen in a university brochure. It was far away. That's all that mattered. I checked my phone every hour. They're busy, I thought. They're angry. They're waiting for me to call and apologize. A week went by. My phone was silent. I found an apartment share with a guy named Ethan who barely looked up from his computer when I moved in. I got a new job in the university mailroom. A month went by. No one called, no one texted, no one posted, "Have you seen Grace on Facebook?" No one noticed I was gone. And that's when I finally understood. The silence wasn't an accident. It was the answer. It was the final verdict. And standing in my new empty room with its bare walls and a window that overlooked an alley, I realized something. That profound silence, the one that was supposed to prove I was worthless. It didn't break me. It freed me. 2 years went by. 2 years. 730 days. My family's indifference wasn't just a phase. It was a permanent condition. Their silence was the one constant thing in my life, and I learned to treat it like background noise. I moved to Madison, Wisconsin. The city was cold in the winter, but the people were kind. I found an apartment with a roommate, Ethan, a history major who spent most of his time reading. He was quiet, but it was a shared, comfortable quiet. Sometimes we'd cook pasta in the tiny kitchen, barely speaking, just enjoying the shared warmth. It was the first time I'd lived with someone who didn't make me feel like I was in the way. I poured everything I had into my archivist program at the university. I loved it. I loved the smell of old paper, the weight of forgotten histories, the idea that my job was to make sure nothing was ever truly lost. I was building my own archive, a life where every piece mattered, where every file had a place. And I built a new family, a chosen family. There was my roommate Ethan. There were my professors who praised my research. There were the other students in my program who I'd study with late into the night. And then there was Jacob. I met Jacob in the law library. He was a second-year law student with kind eyes and a patience that seemed almost supernatural. I was there for a work-study job scanning old documents. He was just there. He didn't try to impress me. He just saw me. Our first date was at a cheap coffee shop, and we talked for 3 hours about everything from legal theory to the best way to digitize a 19th century diary. He listened when I talked. He remembered details. When I told him vaguely that my family wasn't in the picture, he didn't press for details. He just said, "Well, their loss. More of you for the rest of us." With Jacob, the silence was never hollow. It was full. Full of quiet understanding, late-night study sessions where we'd just sit across from each other, and the unspoken promise that I was finally seen. My new life was quiet. But, unlike the silence I left behind, this quiet was full. It was filled with the sound of Ethan's keyboard tapping in the next room, the rustle of old manuscripts at the library, and the low, steady sound of Jacob's voice as he read case law aloud. I was 20 years old. I was excelling in my classes. I had friends. I was in love. I hadn't spoken to my parents, Joseph and Nicole, or my sisters, Alexandra and Olivia, in 2 full years. And for the first time in my life, I was completely unequivocally happy. Then, after 2 full years of silence, my phone rang. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the library scanning a document when the screen lit up with a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was from back home. I stepped out into the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs, and I answered. "Hello?" Grace. The voice was stiff, rusty. It took me a second to place it. It was my father, Joseph. "Hi," I said. My own voice sounded foreign. There was a long, awkward pause. The sound of static, and 2 years of indifference filling the space between us. He cleared his throat. "So, your grandmother passed away." He said it just like that. Not, "I'm so sorry to tell you," or, "There's sad news." He said it like he was informing me a package had been delayed. "Oh," I said. I felt a small, distant pang for the woman I barely knew, but mostly I felt nothing. Just cold. "Yeah," he said. "The funeral was last week. Anyway, we need you to come home. There are some papers you need to sign for the estate." And there it was. The real reason for the call. It wasn't that they missed me, it wasn't that they were sorry, it was that they needed something. After 2 years of acting like I didn't exist, I had suddenly become necessary for their paperwork. "I'm not coming home," I said. "Grace, don't be difficult," he said, his voice instantly shifting from awkward to annoyed. "This isn't a request, it's a legal matter. We just need you to come home, sign the papers, and you can go right back to whatever it is you're doing. Whatever it is I'm doing." He didn't even know. He'd never asked. "I'm not coming home," I said again, and this time my voice was firm. "If it's a legal matter, you can handle it like one. Goodbye, Joseph." I hung up before he could respond. My hand was shaking, but not from sadness. It was rage. A cold, quiet rage I hadn't let myself feel in 2 years. I walked straight to the law library. Jacob was at his usual table surrounded by stacks of books. He looked up when I sat down, and his smile faded when he saw my face. "What's wrong?" I told him. The call. The grandmother. The demand to sign some papers. He listened patiently, his expression hardening. When I finished, he didn't say, "But Grace, it's your family." He didn't say, "Maybe you should just go." He said, "They're not asking you to come home to grieve Grace. They're asking for a signature. That's a transaction. And you should never ever sign anything from them without reading it." He paused, tapping his pen on his textbook. "You shouldn't have to read it at all. I should." A wave of relief washed over me so strong it almost made me dizzy. He got it. He saw it for exactly what it was. "What do I do?" I asked. "You take the power back," he said. "You treat this exactly the way they are, like a business deal." I took a deep breath. I pulled out my phone and found the text message from my sister Alexandra that had come in while I was walking over. "Dad said you were difficult. Just come home, Grace. Don't make this a thing." I typed out my reply, not just to her, but to all of them, my father, my mother, both my sisters. "I will not be coming home. If there are legal documents that require my review, you can send a PDF copy to my legal representative. He will advise me on my obligations. His email is jacob.lawrence@wisconsin.edu. I hit send. It felt like setting down a bag I'd been carrying my entire life. The placeholder daughter was done. From now on, they could talk to the archivist and her lawyer. The email from Jacob came 2 days later. The subject line was just one word, Grace. I opened it. It was a single sentence. "Call me as soon as you get this. Do not, under any circumstances, talk to your family." My blood went cold. I ducked out of the mailroom and called him from the hallway, my hand shaking. "Jacob, what is it? What did they send?" "They sent the estate papers," he said, and his voice was different. It wasn't the calm, supportive voice I was used to. It was cold. It was the voice of a lawyer. "Grace, are you sitting down?" "I'm standing in a hallway. Just tell me." "Okay," he said, taking a breath. "First, your grandmother. She left you $5,000. It was a specific bequest set aside for you. $5,000. I leaned against the wall. My grandmother, a woman I'd seen maybe a dozen times in my life, had thought of me. She had specifically set aside money for me. "But that's not why I'm angry," Jacob continued, his voice hardening. "Grace, they didn't just send me the probate documents. They accidentally included the entire correspondence chain with the estate lawyer. Your father, your mother. They've been trying to get this money for weeks." "What do you mean?" "They needed your signature to disburse the funds," Jacob said, his words sharp and precise. "And when you didn't respond to their first few calls, the ones you told me about, they sent the lawyer a signed document anyway." "But I didn't sign anything." "I know," he said. "Your sister Alexandra forged your signature on the waiver." I felt the air leave my lungs. Forged. My signature. "Wait," Jacob said, "it gets worse. The only reason they're calling you now, the only reason they suddenly need you to come home is because the bank rejected the forgery. The lawyer emailed them last week. He said, and I am quoting, "The signature for Grace Quinn does not match our records. We cannot release the funds without her direct, notarized consent." I was completely silent. I couldn't speak. Grace. They forged my name. They tried to steal from you, Grace, he said. They tried to take your inheritance, and when it failed, they called you, pretending they wanted to reconnect. This wasn't about your grandmother passing. It wasn't about signing some papers. It was a failed attempt at fraud, and this was their desperate plan B. I thought back to the phone call. "We need you to come home." The texts from Alexandra. "Don't be difficult." They hadn't just forgotten me. They hadn't just neglected me. They had actively tried to erase me to steal what was mine, to sign my name and take my money, assuming the invisible daughter would never even know it existed. They didn't call because they missed me. They called because their crime failed. The last tiny flickering ember of hope that maybe, just maybe, they had changed. It didn't just die. It was murdered. The people who were supposed to be my family weren't just neglectful. They were criminals, and I was their victim. I hung up the phone. I stood there in that hallway for a full minute, completely still. The rage I'd felt before was gone, replaced by something cold and heavy like ice. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had tried to erase me. They had put my name on a document, faked my signature, and tried to steal the one thing someone had actually left for me. I walked back into the library, packed my bag, and went straight to Jacob's apartment. He opened the door, took one look at my face, and said, "They're criminals." "Yes," I said. "What do we do?" He led me to his desk. "We don't get emotional," he said, his voice. "All business now. We get organized. You're an archivist, Grace. So let's build a case." We spent the next hour drafting an email. Not to my family, but to the estate lawyer. Jacob attached the PDF of the correspondence my father had accidentally forwarded. He highlighted the forged signature. He attached a scan of my current real signature from my university ID. His email was short, professional, and brutal. "Mr. Harrison, I first represent Grace Quinn. It has come to our attention that a forged document bearing her signature was submitted to your office in an attempt to unlawfully access her inheritance. We have attached proof of this forgery, as well as the correspondence chain confirming the intent. We are forwarding this information to the bank's fraud department and the local district attorney's office. Please cease all contact with Joseph and Nicole, who no longer represent Miss Quinn's interests in any capacity. We expect the $5,000 to be wired to her account immediately." He hit send. "What happens now?" I asked. Now Jacob said we wait for the system to do its job. The fallout was immediate. The estate lawyer facing potential disbarment for negligence called Jacob within an hour, apologizing profusely. He confirmed that Joseph and Nicole had been removed as executors and that a formal fraud investigation had been opened. My parents, my sisters, they didn't call. I guess there's not much you can say after you've been caught committing a felony. The $5,000 appeared in my bank account 3 days later. I stared at the number on my screen. It felt heavy. It was the last piece of my old life. A final, painful transaction. I knew what I had to do. I didn't book a vacation. I didn't buy a new wardrobe. I went online and I bought a professional-grade archival scanner and a heavy oak desk for my apartment. I invested that money not in escaping but in building. I invested it in my future, in my work, in the life that I had created. When the desk arrived, Jacob helped me assemble it. As I ran my hand over the smooth wood, I thought about the choice I'd made. There's a pain that comes with cutting ties with family. We're taught that bloodline is everything. That family is a bond that can never and should never be broken. We're taught to feel guilty for walking away from people who hurt us just because they share our last name. But I've learned that family is not an excuse for cruelty. It is not a free pass for abuse, neglect, or theft. Sometimes the bravest and most necessary act of self-love is not to forgive, but to leave. It's the moment you finally stop setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. It's letting go of the idea of the family you wished you had to protect the person you've actually become. That desk was my new foundation. The scanner was my new tool. I was my own archivist, and I was choosing what to preserve and I was choosing to archive my old life, file it away, and finally let it go. This video is for you. If you have ever felt like you were on the fringes of your own life, if you've ever sat at a crowded table and felt completely, utterly alone, if you've been made to feel less than so that someone else could feel more than, I want you to hear this. You are not invisible. You are not a placeholder. Your worth is not determined by their inability to see it. It's okay to walk away from a table where you are not being served. It's okay to build your own. Your life is not an audition for their approval. You are the main event. Thank you for listening to my story.